Sergeant Emily Carter stood at attention in the harsh fluorescent light of Fort Bragg's briefing room, her uniform crisp and her posture unwavering. The low hum of the overhead lights mixed with the murmurs of her new squad, most of whom were seasoned soldiers with years of field experience. Emily had only recently been promoted to sergeant, a milestone that should have brought pride and recognition. Yet, as the men glanced at her, their smirks and whispered jokes made it clear that, to them, she was an anomaly, an outsider who had somehow wandered into a world built for men who had grown up on battlefields and barracks. Her green eyes scanned the room with quiet determination, absorbing the faint scent of gun oil and sweat. She had trained for this moment for years, countless hours running drills, memorizing tactical maneuvers, learning every nuance of the terrain, and studying the psychology of both enemies and allies. Emily knew she was more than capable, but convincing these men of her abilities was another challenge entirely. Her mind ticked with calculations, every potential threat and counteraction filed away with meticulous care. The men around her, however, were laughing at her ideas, dismissing her suggestions with casual arrogance. "She's all theory, none of it real," one muttered. "Watch, she fold under pressure." Emily ignored them. She had learned long ago that patience was a weapon, that timing could disarm even the most confident mockers. Her commanding officer, Colonel Reeves, noticed her in a way the rest of the squad did not. He had seen her during training exercises, watching her make split-second decisions, assess risks with precision, and keep her cool under simulated fire. Reeves had recognized a talent that others were too blind or too arrogant to see. He had also noticed that Emily never sought praise, that she thrived not on recognition but on results. The mission briefing began. The room darkened as the projector flickered to life, illuminating maps of a rugged overseas desert region known for insurgent activity. Reeves' voice carried authority as he outlined the patrol and intelligence goals. "This is a high-risk deployment. Situational awareness and teamwork are critical. We need precision, courage, and adaptability." Emily leaned forward slightly, her hand unconsciously tracing the edge of her notebook, where she had scribbled notes, calculations, and tactical insights she had gathered over the last several nights. She had already studied every detail, every likely ambush route, every potential weak point in the terrain. She had run simulations in her head, rehearsed responses, and calculated the timing of attacks down to the minute. When Reeves called for volunteers for the lead patrol, Emily's hand shot up before anyone could think to mock her. "Sergeant Carter," Reeves said, his voice calm but firm, "you'll lead the reconnaissance team." A ripple of laughter passed through the room. "You want her to lead?" Sergeant Mills, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, whispered to the soldier next to him. "She can't even carry half the gear." Emily's jaw tightened, but she did not flinch. She met Mills' gaze, unyielding. "If you doubt me, you'll see by the time we're back," she said softly. Her voice carried the steel of someone who had been tested in training scenarios that demanded precision, courage, and cunning. It was not arrogance, it was certainty. Packing her gear later, Emily methodically checked every weapon, ammunition, and comms device. She reviewed maps again and cross-referenced them with satellite images. Every path, every ridge, every potential vantage point was memorized. She could hear the snickers of her squad as they packed carelessly around her, tossing gear into the Humvees, joking about her excessive planning. But she welcomed it. Let them underestimate her. Let them believe her meticulous preparation was obsession. They would learn, sooner or later, that planning was not weakness, it was survival. As the convoy left the base, Emily climbed into the lead vehicle, her eyes scanning the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, a sun-scorched expanse of sand, rocks, and jagged cliffs. Dust rose behind the convoy, shimmering in the heat. The other soldiers chatted and joked, unaware of the tension coiling in Emily's mind. She observed patterns in the terrain, noting clusters of rocks that could conceal snipers, slopes where landmines might be buried, and areas where a vehicle could easily become trapped. Every detail was a potential threat or advantage, and she cataloged them all silently. One of the newer soldiers, Private Gomez, glanced at her with curiosity. "Aren't you worried we'll think you're too serious?" he asked, half joking. Emily smiled faintly, a shadow of humor in her otherwise intense demeanor. "If we survive, you'll be glad I am," she replied. Her voice carried quiet confidence, not arrogance. Gomez frowned slightly, sensing that this woman was not someone to be dismissed lightly. Hours into the convoy, Emily's predictions began to crystallize. Patterns in enemy movement, subtle anomalies in the terrain, and the behavior of scouts in nearby hills all pointed to one conclusion. An ambush was being planned. She brought it up during a brief stop. "There's a high probability of contact within the next 5 kilometers, she said, pointing to the map. "If we maintain a tight formation and adjust our route slightly, we can avoid a direct attack and keep the squad intact." The men laughed. "Relax, Sergeant. You're reading too much into it," Mills sneered. "It's a routine patrol. Chill out." Emily said nothing further. She understood that words alone would not convince them. Preparation, alertness, and quick action would. And if the ambush came, they would remember the face of the woman they had laughed at, the woman who had been ready all along. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows over the desert, Emily's mind never wavered. She imagined the convoy moving through a trap, vehicles immobilized, the squad pinned down. In her mind, she ran every contingency, every response, every tactical maneuver. She was ready, even if no one else was. The first hints of movement appeared at the edges of the desert cliffs. Emily's heart rate quickened, not with fear, but with the anticipation of proof. Soon, the reality of her foresight would come to light. Soon, the squad would need her skill, courage, and leadership to survive. And then, finally, they would understand that underestimating her had been the gravest mistake of their careers. For now, the desert whispered around her, silent and watchful. Emily Carter, the woman they laughed at, smiled faintly. They had no idea that history was about to prove her right. The desert sun rose with unforgiving intensity, bathing the convoy in a harsh golden glare. Sergeant Emily Carter adjusted her sunglasses, scanning the horizon for the first signs of trouble. Every ridge, every rock formation, every wavering heat mirage could conceal a threat. Her squad, confident in their experience, but dismissive of her cautions, joked and traded stories about previous deployments. Emily said little, her focus unbroken. In her mind, the desert was alive with possibilities, each one a potential trap. Private Ramirez, a wiry young soldier, nudged a helmeted comrade and whispered, "She's too serious, don't you think? Relax a little." Emily caught the remark from the corner of her eye, but offered nothing. She had learned long ago that humor at her expense was a test she would always pass with silent composure. The convoy moved methodically, tires crunching over sand and gravel. Emily's eyes darted constantly, scanning potential high points where snipers could hide, noting gullies and depressions where IEDs might be concealed. Her mind ran through hundreds of scenarios, calculating reaction times, optimal positioning, and contingencies. She was aware that every second could become a matter of life or death. Sergeant Mills leaned back in his seat, tossing a water bottle lazily from hand to hand. "Relax, Carter. This isn't some school drill. You're overthinking everything." His words were a mixture of jest and arrogance, designed to undermine her authority in front of the others. Emily's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She said nothing. Let them doubt her. Let them think that precision, preparation, and attention to detail were signs of weakness. The moment would come when they would need every ounce of her skill to survive, and she would be ready. Hours passed. The convoy maintained a steady pace. Emily's instincts began to hum, a low, persistent warning that something was off. A small dust cloud appeared on the horizon, too precise to be natural. She squinted against the sun, studying its trajectory. Eyes on the ridge to the northeast, she murmured to herself. No one listened. The first sign of danger came suddenly. A sharp crack echoed across the convoy. Emily's reflexes were instantaneous. She dove behind the dashboard, shoving Ramirez down with her as the echo of gunfire ricocheted against the desert cliffs. Bullets tore through the air, kicking sand and dust into the heat. Private Davis, walking alongside a Humvee, froze, his eyes wide in panic. Emily grabbed his arm and pulled him behind cover, her voice firm and commanding. Move, now. Follow my lead. The squad scrambled, some instinctively, others hesitantly. Mills shouted orders that were chaotic, contradicting each other, while Emily's commands cut through the confusion like a blade. Cover the left flank. Move to the rocks. Don't stop. Her voice carried authority that left no room for argument. She assessed the ambush in real time. Small arms fire came from multiple positions along the ridges, calculated and deadly. Emily's heart rate surged, not from fear, but from focus. Every muscle, every thought, every calculation was activated. She moved from point to point, directing fire, dragging the wounded to safety, and keeping the squad coordinated. Amid the chaos, she noticed Corporal Davis had been grazed by a bullet. Blood streaked his cheek, but his panic threatened to paralyze him. Emily knelt beside him, checking the wound and applying pressure. Stay with me. We move in 3 seconds. You're fine, soldier. You hear me? Her voice was calm yet commanding, giving him a tether to reality amid the firestorm. The enemy had anticipated their route perfectly. Vehicles were immobilized, engines smoking, tires shredded. The squad was split into small clusters, pinned by precise sniper fire. The others looked at Emily, their laughter and doubts now replaced with fear and awe. Her orders became lifelines. She assessed their options swiftly. The surrounding rocks and ridges provided natural cover, but the enemy had anticipated that too. Emily knew direct confrontation would be suicidal. Instead, she devised a countermaneuver, directing half the squad to create suppressive fire while she led a small team to flank the attackers. Ramirez, you're with me, she said, her tone leaving no room for hesitation. The young soldier nodded, wide-eyed but trusting. Emily led him through a narrow canyon. Keeping low, her senses stretched to the limit. Every sound, every shadow, every movement was critical. The flanking route brought them close enough to see the enemy positions. 3 snipers, 2 riflemen, all strategically placed. Emily whispered instructions to Ramirez and Davis, pointing out weak angles and timing for their counterattack. Wait for my signal. Precision, not speed. 1 shot, 1 target, clear. The chaos behind them was deafening, gunfire mixing with the roar of engines and shouts. Emily's focus was absolute. The moment came. She gave the signal. Ramirez and Davis fired in tandem, coordinated as she had trained them, taking out 2 of the shooters. Emily's shot was flawless, neutralizing the final sniper. The ridges fell silent, leaving only the crackle of distant gunfire and the heavy breathing of the squad. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the remaining squad members regrouped, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and newfound respect. Mills approached Emily, his jaw tight, eyes avoiding hers. You planned this? Emily said nothing, letting the silence speak for her. She had known the ambush was coming. She had prepared. She had led. And now, for the first time, the squad understood. Underestimating her had been a mistake. The convoy moved on, battered but intact. Emily checked every soldier, ensured everyone was accounted for, and maintained vigilance. The ambush had been a test, a brutal introduction to the reality of the region. The desert had no mercy, and neither could they afford to. As the sun began to dip below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the sand, Emily allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had earned a fragile respect, not through words or bravado, but through action. The men who had laughed at her now followed her lead, their doubts replaced by an understanding they would not forget. But Emily knew the danger was far from over. This ambush had been only the first brush with the enemies they would face. Every calculation, every preparation, every moment of foresight would be tested again. And she would be ready. Always. The desert night fell, quiet for the first time in hours, but Emily's mind did not rest. She reviewed every detail of the ambush, every movement of the enemy, every decision that had saved lives. Lessons learned here would be invaluable for the battles ahead. The squad had survived because of her, and she silently vowed it would always be that way, prepared, vigilant, unstoppable. And somewhere, high in the cliffs where the ambush had begun, Emily imagined the enemy retreating, realizing too late that the woman they dismissed was already 10 steps ahead. The first battle had been survived. The war had only begun. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Sergeant Emily Carter climbed to the top of a small dune, her binoculars pressed to her eyes. The desert stretched endlessly before, an expanse of shifting sands, jagged rock formations, and deep gullies that could conceal danger at every turn. Emily had learned early in her deployment that the desert was alive with threats, each more cunning than the last. And today, something felt wrong. She traced the faint patterns of dust clouds and distant movement along the ridges. A small trail of vehicle tracks intersected with the convoy's planned route. It wasn't random. Emily's gut tightened as she analyzed the angles, the timing, the shadows cast by the morning sun. Every piece of data pointed to one inescapable conclusion. An ambush was imminent. Descending the dune, Emily approached the squad, who were taking a brief rest near a rock outcrop. Sergeant Mills lounged lazily, joking with Ramirez and Davis about yesterday's firefight. "Relax, Carter. You're seeing threats in every sand grain," he said, smirking. Emily's green eyes, sharp and unwavering, met his. "This isn't a joke," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. "There's a high probability that enemy forces are lying in wait along our next route. I've mapped possible ambush points, and they align perfectly with our convoy path. If we don't adjust, we'll walk into a trap." Mills laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "High probability? You're paranoid. We made it through yesterday, didn't we?" Emily didn't rise to the bait. She knew that convincing them with words alone was useless. "This isn't about luck or courage," she replied evenly. "It's about preparation and positioning. We need to move cautiously, double-check our surroundings, and stay alert. One wrong step, and it could be catastrophic." The younger soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Some, like Private Gomez, hesitated, sensing Emily's urgency, but unsure if it warranted action. "Are you sure, Sergeant?" he asked, voice low. Emily nodded, her expression serious. "I've analyzed the terrain, patterns, and enemy behavior. Every detail points to an ambush. Trust me on this. We can avoid it, but only if we follow a revised plan." Mills snorted dismissively. "Trust you? Please. You're not even in the field half as long as some of us. You're just reading maps and staring at dust clouds." Emily's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had faced dismissal before. Men like Mills thrived on ego, their confidence bolstered by experience and routine. But routine had almost killed them yesterday, and she wasn't about to let history repeat itself. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Experience doesn't matter if you're blind to the obvious," she said softly, but with steel in her tone. "Yesterday was luck. Today, if we don't adapt, luck won't save us. You can dismiss me now, or you can survive because you listened." The men fell silent, the words settling into the dry, hot air like embers. For a moment, the tension was almost unbearable. Ramirez shifted uncomfortably, clearly torn between loyalty to Mills and the undeniable logic in Emily's assessment. Later, she found a quiet spot near a rock formation and unfolded her maps. Using small pebbles, she demonstrated the likely ambush positions. Each ridge, each depression, each narrow path was marked with precision. "This is where snipers could hide," she said, pointing to a jagged cliff. "Here's the choke point where vehicles could get stuck. And here," she traced a shallow ditch, "is a trap for infantry. If they hit us here, our casualties will be high before we even have a chance to respond." Gomez peered over her shoulder. "That actually makes sense," he muttered. His voice carried a hint of fear. For the first time, the young soldier looked at Emily not as an outsider, but as a leader. Mills, however, remained unconvinced. "You're overthinking," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He glanced at Davis and the others, hoping for support, but some of the soldiers now avoided eye contact, clearly uneasy with his dismissal. Emily sensed the shift. Even if they wouldn't admit it, doubt was beginning to creep into the minds of the men who had once mocked her. That evening, as the squad settled into a temporary camp, Emily continued her preparations quietly. She checked ammunition, tested communication equipment, and rehearsed evacuation and fallback routes. Each movement was deliberate, calculated. She didn't just prepare herself, she created invisible safeguards for the men who doubted her. As night fell, the desert's oppressive silence seemed to hum with anticipation. Emily crouched near the edge of the camp, listening to distant sounds. The faint scrape of sand against rock, the subtle shift of wind through narrow canyons, the eerie stillness that often preceded chaos. She imagined the convoy moving through her marked ambush zones, the enemy lying in wait, and every second counted. Ramirez approached cautiously. "Sergeant, do you really think it's coming tonight?" he asked. His voice betrayed his anxiety. Emily studied him for a moment. "I don't hope it isn't," she said quietly. "I know it is. And if it is, we'll be ready. That's the only way we survive." The young soldier nodded, swallowing hard, and returned to his tent. Emily remained outside, reviewing her mental map of the terrain. She thought of her squad, their laughter, their skepticism, their inexperience, and made a silent promise. She would not let any of them die because of arrogance, overconfidence, or carelessness. Later, Mills passed by, a sneer on his face. "Still staring at rocks, Carter? You're wasting your time." Emily met his gaze evenly. "And you're wasting your lives," she said simply. No one laughed this time. The words hung heavy in the night air. Hours dragged on. Emily's eyes scanned the darkness, and every instinct screamed at her to stay alert. She knew that tomorrow, the convoy would move through the exact paths she had highlighted. She could anticipate every potential attack, every trap, every deadly misstep. She had already planned responses for each, and she would act with precision when the moment came. Sleep came fitfully, shallow, and fragmented. Emily's dreams were filled with sandstorms, gunfire, and shadows of unseen enemies. Even in slumber, her mind rehearsed contingencies. She would not be caught unprepared. Not now, not ever. As the first light of dawn broke, painting the desert in a stark white glare, Emily rose quietly. She gathered her maps, checked her gear, and inspected the squad's positions. Everything was as it should be. The men stirred, groggy and unaware of the danger she had been preparing for all night. Emily stood at the edge of the camp, scanning the horizon. The ambush was coming. She could feel it in the shifting sands, in the movement of shadows, in the quiet anticipation of the desert itself. And when it struck, the squad would see the truth. The woman they laughed at, the one they dismissed, had been ready all along. Their survival depended on her foresight, her courage, and her unwavering calm in the face of inevitable chaos. Emily Carter, the outsider, the underestimated, was about to prove herself in a way that no one would forget. And for the first time, the squad began to realize that her warnings were not paranoia, but a lifeline. The convoy rumbled forward under the scorching sun, engines straining against the uneven desert terrain. Emily Carter sat in the lead Humvee, her eyes constantly scanning the landscape, noting every ridge, every shadow, every deviation in the sand. The desert seemed calm, almost serene, but she knew better. Her instincts screamed that danger was near. Behind her, the squad laughed nervously, trying to shake the tension. "See, nothing to worry about," Nils muttered, slapping Ramirez on the back. Emily did not respond. She had prepared for this moment for hours, and she would not be distracted by bravado. Then it happened. A deafening explosion ripped through the convoy, the first Humvee flipping violently as fire and dust erupted into the air. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Bullets whipped through the sand, tearing into vehicle doors and kicking up clouds of smoke. Chaos erupted instantly. Soldiers shouted, scrambling for cover. Emily reacted immediately. She ducked low behind the dashboard, pulling Private Ramirez down with her. Her voice rang out, cutting through the roar of destruction. "Form a perimeter. Move now." Corporal Davis froze, stunned by the sudden attack. Emily grabbed his arm, dragging him behind a rock outcrop. "Get moving. Cover your flank," she yelled. Her words were sharp, precise, and without hesitation. Every second counted. The enemy had executed their ambush flawlessly. Gunfire came from multiple ridges, each shooter coordinated, each angle deadly. Vehicles were immobilized, burning, or flipped on their sides. The squad, unprepared for the ferocity of the attack, faltered under fire. But Emily's presence became the anchor amidst the storm. She moved from position to position, directing soldiers into cover, shouting instructions, and maintaining situational awareness. "Davis, cover that ridge." "Ramirez, suppress fire on the left." "Mills, drag the wounded to the rocks." Emily commanded, her voice unwavering. Mills hesitated, panic flickering in his eyes. "We can't. You will." Emily cut him off sharply. "Do it now." He snapped to action, moving with renewed purpose. The squad began to respond to her leadership, realizing that survival depended on following her direction. Emily's training and preparation had anticipated this moment. She had identified natural choke points, potential traps, and fallback positions. Every action she had planned now guided the squad through the deadly terrain. Emily scanned the battlefield. Snipers occupied ridges, riflemen fired from hidden gullies, and grenades exploded near immobilized vehicles. The squad was scattered, some pinned behind rocks, others crouched behind smoldering Humvees. Emily made a split-second decision. Direct confrontation would be suicidal. Instead, she would use a flanking maneuver to divide the enemy's focus. "Ramirez, Davis, follow me. We flank the ridge on the east side," she ordered. Her tone left no room for argument. The two younger soldiers followed without hesitation, trusting her judgment completely now. The three of them moved swiftly, keeping low, navigating between rocks and debris. Bullets kicked up sand at their feet, each impact a reminder of the stakes. Emily led them with precision, calculating every step, timing every movement, and anticipating enemy reactions. She could see the snipers' positions, the gaps in their coverage, the angles that left them vulnerable. When they reached the east ridge, Emily paused briefly, scanning the enemy positions. 3 targets, she whispered. Ramirez takes the left, Davis the right. I take the center. On my signal? Fire. The young soldiers nodded, fear tempered by trust. Emily counted down silently in her head, her pulse steady, her breath controlled. Then she gave the signal. Gunfire erupted simultaneously. Ramirez's shots hit their mark, taking down one sniper. Davis's bullets found another. Emily's aim was flawless, neutralizing the final threat. The ridges fell silent, save for the distant crackle of remaining gunfire and the heavy breathing of the squad. Emily didn't pause. She checked the remaining squad numbers, ensuring no one was injured or left behind. Mills approached, his face pale, eyes avoiding hers. You planned this? He asked, disbelief in his voice. Emily nodded simply. Preparedness isn't luck, she said quietly. It's survival. With the immediate threat neutralized, Emily assessed the convoy. Vehicles were damaged, supplies scattered, and wounded soldiers needed assistance. She organized teams to drag the injured to safer positions, to salvage what equipment they could, and to establish a temporary perimeter. Every movement was deliberate, every decision calculated. The squad, once mocking and skeptical, now followed her instructions without question. Hours passed in a tense blur. Emily moved tirelessly, directing suppressive fire, coordinating the defense, and keeping the squad calm under relentless stress. She anticipated every enemy tactic, countered every advance, and kept morale intact. Even Mills began to see the truth. The woman they had underestimated was the reason they were still alive. By midday, the enemy seemed to retreat, regrouping behind distant ridges. Emily used the lull to reorganize the squad, redistribute ammunition, and prepare for the inevitable second wave. She checked every soldier personally, ensuring they were accounted for and ready. Stay alert, she warned. They're not done yet. We hold this ground or we risk everything. As the sun reached its zenith, casting harsh shadows over the desert, Emily allowed herself a brief glance at the horizon. Dust clouds stirred in the distance, subtle hints of enemy movement. The ambush was far from over, but the squad had survived the first wave. The desert, harsh and unyielding, had tested them, and Emily had guided them through. In the quiet moments between attacks, Emily reflected on the irony of the situation. The men who had laughed at her, mocked her foresight, and doubted her abilities, now depended entirely on her skill and courage. Every scoff, every snide remark, every underestimation had led them to this point. And she had anticipated it all, silently, methodically, perfectly. By late afternoon, Emily finally allowed herself a brief pause. She crouched behind a rock, surveying the battlefield. Smoke rose from overturned vehicles. The ground was scarred by bullets and explosions, and the air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of gunpowder. But the squad was intact. Not without injury, not without fear, but intact. Emily knew the real challenge was still ahead. The enemy would regroup, attempt another assault, and test their defenses once more. She had bought them time, secured a temporary advantage, and demonstrated her capability. But the desert was relentless, and so was the enemy. Survival depended on vigilance, preparation, and unyielding courage. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the sand, Emily spoke quietly to her squad. We survive together. Follow my lead, and we make it through. Trust me. That's the only way we survive this. For the first time, her words were met not with doubt, but with silent agreement. The squad had seen her skill, her foresight, and her bravery. The woman they had laughed at was no longer an outsider. She was their anchor, their strategist, and their leader. The ambush had begun, but Emily Carter had proven herself. And the desert, with all its danger and uncertainty, had no choice but to acknowledge her. The desert sun cast a harsh glare over the battlefield, reflecting off the smoldering remnants of overturned Humvees and jagged rocks pocked with bullet marks. Sergeant Emily Carter moved swiftly among her squad, her eyes sharp, calculating every movement, every expression. The initial ambush had rattled them, but now they needed focus, cohesion, and decisive action, or they would not survive the day. "Form a defensive perimeter," Emily ordered, her voice cutting through the heat and dust. "We hold this ground. Stay low, stay alert, and keep communication lines open." Private Ramirez, still shaken from the previous firefight, fumbled with his rifle. Emily crouched beside him, adjusting his stance and demonstrating how to use the uneven terrain for cover. "You're not just hiding," she explained calmly. "You're controlling their sightlines. Every second they can't see you is a second you control." Across the battlefield, Mills grumbled but complied. For the first time, his skepticism faltered under Emily's quiet authority. He glanced at her with a mix of frustration and awe. "Didn't think she could handle this," he muttered under his breath. Emily didn't answer. There was no time for discussion. Every second mattered. She scanned the ridges again, noting enemy positions that had shifted since the initial assault. Small groups were regrouping, attempting to flank their position. Emily quickly formulated a plan. "Ramirez Davis with me. We're going to take that ridge to the east, create a diversion, and cut off their advance. The rest of you hold the line here." The two younger soldiers nodded, fear tempered by trust. Emily led them through rocky gullies, keeping low and moving quickly. Bullets kicked up sand at their feet, some ricocheting dangerously close, but Emily's calm focus kept them safe. Each step, each movement was deliberate, calculated to maximize their advantage while minimizing exposure. As they reached the eastern ridge, Emily crouched behind a boulder and surveyed the enemy's regrouping forces. She identified 3 key targets: 2 riflemen moving to flank her squad, and a sniper attempting to gain a better vantage point. Her mind raced, considering angles, timing, and the squad's capabilities. Ramirez left. Davis right. I'll cover the center. Wait for my signal. Then fire. 1 target each. Precision counts, Emily instructed quietly. The 2 young soldiers nodded, their trust in her now absolute. Emily's eyes flicked to the enemy, counting down silently. Then she gave the signal. Gunfire erupted, sharp and controlled. Ramirez's shot downed the first rifleman. Davis's bullet found the second. Emily's aim was flawless, taking out the sniper with a single precise shot. The flanking maneuver was successful. Emily didn't pause. She signaled the rest of the squad to advance cautiously. They moved with a new confidence, bolstered by her success. The perimeter held, and the enemy's momentum was disrupted. Emily coordinated suppressive fire while rallying the men who had faltered under the first attack. "Keep it tight. Don't let them regroup," she shouted, moving from position to position, reinforcing weak points in the line. Mills, once openly mocking her, now followed her commands with precision. Even the soldiers who had doubted her instinctively mirrored her movements, trusting her judgment implicitly. As the day wore on, Emily noticed a critical vulnerability in the enemy's formation. A narrow canyon ran parallel to the main ridge, perfect for a flanking attack that could force the attackers into a bottleneck. She relayed the plan swiftly, assigning soldiers to key positions to create a crossfire trap. They'll have no choice but to enter the canyon. When they do, hit them from both sides. We control the battlefield. The squad executed the maneuver flawlessly. Enemy soldiers, unaware of the trap, charged into the canyon, only to be met with precise, coordinated fire. Sand erupted into the air as bullets struck rocks, forcing the attackers into defensive positions. Emily's plan had worked. The tide of the battle had turned. Amid the chaos, Emily continued to check on her team, tending to minor injuries, redistributing ammunition, and ensuring communication lines were maintained. She moved with purpose, every action calculated to maximize the squad's efficiency and survival. Hours of intense combat passed. The squad's confidence grew with every successful maneuver, and Emily's authority solidified. Even Mills, hardened by years of field experience, approached her with quiet respect. "Sergeant, you've got a gift," he admitted. "I don't know how you do it." Emily gave him a brief nod, her focus never wavering from the battlefield. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about surviving. Follow the plan, and we make it out alive." The enemy, battered and disoriented by the flanking attack, began to retreat, attempting to regroup behind distant ridges. Emily used the lull to reorganize the squad, checking positions, redistributing supplies, and reinforcing weak points. Every detail mattered. One misstep could undo all the progress they had fought so hard to achieve. Even as the immediate threat receded, Emily remained vigilant. She knew that the enemy would attempt another assault, more determined and more desperate than before. She planned for the second wave, marking fallback points, assigning suppressive fire positions, and preparing signals for coordinated counterattacks. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the desert in deep, golden hues, Emily allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had taken control of a chaotic battlefield, saved lives, and turned an ambush into a tactical advantage. The squad, once skeptical and dismissive, now relied entirely on her judgment and skill. But Emily knew better than to relax. The battle was far from over. The enemy would return, and their next attack would test every skill, every ounce of courage, and every decision she had made. She had bought them time, but survival required continued vigilance. The squad regrouped, holding the line as night approached. Emily checked each soldier personally, ensuring they were ready for the challenges ahead. She moved with calm authority, her presence a stabilizing force amid the tense quiet of the desert. For the first time since deployment, the men who had doubted her began to understand the depth of her skill. Her preparation, foresight, and courage had not only kept them alive, they had given them a chance to fight another day. The desert, harsh and unyielding, had tested them. Emily had responded with precision and leadership. And though exhaustion weighed heavily on the squad, hope had returned. They would survive, together, because of her. As night fell and the first stars appeared above the endless sands, Emily stood at the edge of their position, surveying the battlefield. She silently vowed to protect her squad, to anticipate every threat, and to lead them through the challenges still to come. The turning point had been reached, but the war was far from over. And somewhere, in the shadows of distant ridges, the enemy regrouped, unaware that the woman they had dismissed was already 10 steps ahead. Night descended over the desert like a velvet curtain, muffling sounds and transforming the familiar terrain into a maze of shadows and uncertainty. The squad huddled behind rocks, Humvee wreckage, and natural dunes, catching their breath after the brutal daytime assault. Exhaustion weighed heavily on every soldier, their muscles trembling from hours of combat. Yet Sergeant Emily Carter remained alert, her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, every sound that might hint at renewed enemy aggression. Nightfall. "Doesn't mean they're gone," she warned quietly, crouched atop a ridge with Ramirez and Davis. "Stay alert. This is when they strike hardest. Stay in position and follow orders, no improvising unless I tell you." Mills, once her harshest critic, nodded silently, the edge of his skepticism finally gone. He glanced at the squad, now unified and disciplined under Emily's command. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered under his breath. "But she's the real deal." Emily didn't respond. Words were irrelevant here. Only action, vigilance, and precision mattered. The first signs of renewed enemy activity came as subtle movements along the distant ridges, a shadow shifting, the glint of a scope catching the faint moonlight. Emily noted the patterns, anticipating the enemy's approach. She quickly relayed instructions. "Suppressive fire on the east flank. Mills, take 2 men and cover the west. Ramirez and Davis, with me, will intercept the main approach." The squad moved silently, each soldier aware that noise could be fatal. Emily led the flanking team through narrow gullies and uneven terrain, keeping low, using rocks and shadows for cover. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with acute awareness. She was fully in control, every movement calculated. They reached a narrow canyon that served as the enemy's most likely approach route. Emily crouched behind a boulder, surveying the terrain. "Here's where they'll come. Wait for my signal. 1 shot each. Precision counts." The enemy advanced cautiously, unaware of the trap Emily had laid. Shadows shifted as they entered the canyon, and Emily counted silently, her mind running contingencies for every possible reaction. "Now," she whispered, and gunfire erupted with deadly accuracy. Ramirez's shot downed the first enemy combatant. Davis eliminated the second. Emily's aim was flawless, neutralizing the sniper, attempting to gain a high vantage point. The ambush within the ambush had worked. The enemy faltered, chaos erupting in their ranks. But Emily knew better than to assume victory. Reinforcements would arrive, and the enemy would adapt. She signaled her squad to advance cautiously, moving to positions that reinforced the canyon trap and secured their perimeter. Mills and his team took their positions on the west ridge, providing crossfire. Hours of relentless combat followed. The enemy launched multiple assaults, each wave testing the squad's resolve and Emily's leadership. Bullets ripped through rocks, sand erupted from impacts, and explosions shook the ground beneath them. Yet Emily remained calm, orchestrating the squad's defense with precision, anticipating the enemy's every move. At one point, a grenade exploded near Davis, sending him sprawling. Emily was immediately at his side, dragging him behind cover. "You're okay," she said firmly, checking him for injuries. "Stay low and cover your flank. I've got the rest." Her calm composure reassured the younger soldiers, allowing them to focus despite the chaos. The enemy attempted to flank them from multiple angles, but Emily's preplanned positions and tactical foresight held firm. She rotated her squads, fire positions, moved soldiers to reinforce weak points, and ensured no one was left exposed. Her leadership transformed fear into coordinated action. Mills approached her briefly, his face grim. "We can't hold them much longer if they keep coming," he said. Emily's eyes narrowed, calculating. "We hold, we survive. That's the only option. Follow my lead, and we'll make it through." As midnight approached, exhaustion began to take its toll. Soldiers' arms trembled from constant firing, eyes strained from darkness and tension. Emily herself felt fatigue, but she pressed on, drawing strength from her resolve. She was the anchor, the guiding force, and she refused to falter. The enemy regrouped for what seemed to be their final assault, surging with desperate force. Emily anticipated their advance, repositioning the squad to reinforce weak points and maximize crossfire. The soldiers, now fully trusting her judgment, moved with precision, executing her orders without hesitation. Bullets tore through the night, and the sound of shouting echoed across the desert. Emily moved from position to position, checking on every soldier, distributing ammunition, and coordinating fire. She ignored her own injuries, a graze on her arm and a bruised shoulder because she had no choice. Every second mattered, and her squad depended entirely on her. At the peak of the assault, Emily identified a critical weakness in the enemies: formation, a narrow ridge they were using to funnel attacks. With precise timing, she led a concentrated counterattack, firing from multiple angles and forcing the enemy into a bottleneck. The enemy faltered under the crossfire, sustaining heavy casualties, and the momentum shifted. The squad rallied, driven by Emily's leadership and calm confidence. For the first time, Mills and the other seasoned soldiers realized that her meticulous preparation, keen observation, and unshakable courage had been the deciding factor in their survival. Hours passed, and the enemy, battered and disoriented, began to retreat. Emily held her squad in position, ensuring that no one pursued recklessly and that all fallback points were secured. The desert fell quiet again, punctuated only by the distant groans of the injured and the crackle of smoldering vehicles. Emily finally allowed herself a brief pause, surveying the battlefield. The squad was battered but intact. Every man was accounted for. Mills approached her, exhaustion and awe evident on his face. You saved us," he admitted quietly. Emily shook her head. "I didn't save you. We survived because we stayed together, followed orders, and stayed alert. We adapted. That's what kept us alive." The squad, once skeptical and mocking, now viewed Emily with unwavering respect. They had witnessed her skill, her foresight, and her courage under the most extreme conditions. The woman they had underestimated had become their anchor, their leader, and the reason they lived. As the first hints of dawn touched the desert horizon, Emily gathered the squad. "We hold our position until reinforcements arrive," she instructed. "Then we regroup and move out. Stay alert, danger isn't over." The men nodded silently, a quiet unity forming among them. Fear and exhaustion remained, but trust had replaced doubt. They had survived the night because of Emily, and they knew it. Crouched behind a rock, Emily allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The desert had tested them, and they had endured. Yet the war was far from over. The enemy would return, stronger and more desperate. But Emily had proven one thing: underestimation of her skill, her preparation, and her courage came at a deadly cost. And somewhere beyond the ridges, the enemy would come to understand that the woman they had laughed at, dismissed, and ignored was already 10 steps ahead. The first light of dawn glinted off the jagged ridges of the desert, casting long shadows across the scarred battlefield. Sergeant Emily Carter rose from her crouched position, surveying the remnants of the night's conflict. The squad, battered but alive, moved silently under her watchful gaze. Though the enemy had retreated during the night, Emily knew this was temporary. The ambush wasn't over. It had only shifted. She moved swiftly, consulting her maps and mental notes. "They'll regroup to the North Ridge," she whispered to Mills, who followed closely. "That's their stronghold. If we hit them there, we end this fight. But we need precision. One wrong step and the entire squad could be overrun." Mills, now fully aware of her brilliance, nodded silently. "Lead the way, Sergeant. We trust you." Emily's mind worked rapidly, calculating angles, firepower, and timing. She divided the squad into small tactical teams. Each soldier had a specific role: suppressive fire, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated advancement. "We move fast, stay low, and control every ridge," she instructed. "No hesitation. Every second counts." The squad advanced cautiously, their movements synchronized under Emily's leadership. The desert, scarred from the previous night's battle, was now littered with debris, smoldering vehicles, and the echoes of gunfire. Emily's eyes scanned every shadow, every ridge, and every possible hiding spot. The enemy had learned nothing from their failed ambush. They were predictable, and Emily intended to exploit it. As they neared the North Ridge, Emily signaled for a halt. She crouched behind a rock, pointing to key positions where the enemy would likely regroup. 3 riflemen at the eastern slope, 2 snipers on the western ridge, and their leader likely in the central canyon. We take them out in one coordinated strike. Private Ramirez swallowed hard. That's a lot of them, Sergeant. Emily's gaze met his. Calm, unwavering, and commanding. Numbers don't matter if we control the battlefield. Precision, timing, and trust in each other. Follow my lead, and we end this today. The squad moved into position, taking cover behind rocks and dunes. Emily checked each soldier, ensuring readiness and ammunition. She adjusted their formation, maximizing cover and minimizing exposure. Then she gave the signal. Gunfire erupted with deadly precision. Ramirez and Davis, under Emily's guidance, eliminated the riflemen on the eastern slope. Mills and his team suppressed the western ridge, keeping the snipers pinned down. Emily advanced toward the central canyon, her rifle steady, every movement calculated. The enemy leader emerged, attempting to rally his men. Emily's eyes narrowed. She had anticipated this. She fired a series of controlled shots, forcing him back into cover. Her team pressed forward, flanking the canyon and cutting off retreat routes. The enemy's cohesion crumbled under Emily's strategy. Amid the chaos, Emily moved with remarkable agility and awareness. Bullets whizzed past, kicking up sand, but she maintained absolute control. Every shot, every movement, every command was deliberate. She wasn't just fighting, she was orchestrating the battlefield. The enemy attempted a desperate counterattack, charging from a concealed gully. Emily's team was ready. Suppressive fire pinned them down, while a coordinated maneuver from Emily and Ramirez cut off their advance. Within minutes, the enemy forces were neutralized, either retreating further or incapacitated. Emily surveyed the battlefield. The north ridge was clear, the enemy decimated. Her squad, though exhausted and bloodied, had executed her plan flawlessly. Mills approached, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know how you do it," he admitted. Emily shook her head, her gaze still scanning the ridges. "It's not about me. It's about understanding the battlefield, anticipating moves, and acting decisively. We survived because we adapted, trusted each other, and stayed focused." The squad began gathering supplies, checking for wounded, and securing the area. Emily moved from soldier to soldier, offering encouragement and guidance. She treated minor injuries, reassured those shaken by the night's events, and maintained vigilance. Every detail mattered, and she ensured nothing was overlooked. As they regrouped near the central ridge, Emily allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The enemy, once confident in their ambush, had been dismantled by a combination of foresight, strategy, and precision. The squad that had laughed at her, doubted her, and underestimated her now looked to her with unwavering respect. Even Mills, gruff and battle-hardened, approached her quietly. "Sergeant Carter, you didn't just save our lives. You led us through hell and came out on top. I owe you more than I can say." Emily offered a faint, tired smile. "You don't owe me anything. You owe yourselves your survival. I just made sure you had the chance." The desert stretched endlessly before them, scarred and quiet after the final clash. Emily scanned the horizon, noting the faint trail of retreating enemy forces. Reinforcements would arrive soon, but the immediate threat had been eliminated. She gathered her squad. "We move carefully, back to base. Keep positions tight, stay alert, and maintain communication. The danger isn't entirely gone, but we've won this battle. Remember what we did today. Trust in each other, and you can survive anything." The squad moved as one, following Emily's lead. Her presence, calm and authoritative, reassured them despite fatigue and injuries. Each soldier had witnessed her skill, foresight, and courage firsthand. The woman they had dismissed was now undeniably their leader. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the desert in stark light, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The enemy was defeated, her squad was alive, and her leadership had been validated in the most extreme conditions. Yet Emily's mind remained sharp, calculating, aware. The desert was unforgiving, and threats could appear at any moment. She would remain vigilant, prepared for anything, and continued to guide her squad with the same precision and courage that had carried them through the ambush. For the first time, the squad moved with confidence, knowing their survival had not been a matter of luck, but the result of strategy, skill, and the leadership of a woman they had once underestimated. Emily Carter, the outsider, the underestimated, had proven herself beyond doubt. The battlefield, harsh and relentless, had tested her, and she had triumphed. The sun had risen fully over the desert, bathing the battlefield in a harsh, white light. Smoke from the previous night's ambush and counterattack still drifted lazily over scorched sand and scattered debris. The once deadly ridges were quiet now, the enemy vanquished and retreating beyond the horizon. Sergeant Emily Carter stood atop a small dune, scanning the desert with the same sharp vigilance that had guided her squad through the ordeal. Her body ached, her uniform was torn and stained with sweat and dust, but her mind remained focused. Survival demanded it, and leadership required it. Behind her, the squad moved methodically, checking equipment, assisting wounded, and surveying the terrain. The soldiers who had laughed at her foresight days ago now worked silently and efficiently under her command. Their skepticism had been replaced with unwavering trust, a bond forged in the crucible of battle. Mills, usually brash and unflinching, approached cautiously. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now held respect, tinged with awe. "Sergeant Carter," he said quietly, I can't believe I ever doubted you. You led us through hell, and we came out alive. Not just alive, we came out victorious." Emily offered a small nod, her expression calm yet reflective. "It wasn't just me. It was every one of you. You adapted, you followed orders, and you stayed focused. That's why we survived. I just guided the plan and made sure we executed it." Ramirez, younger than most of the squad and still visibly shaken from the ordeal, stepped forward. I thought I'd never make it through last night. But you were always calm. You knew what to do, and somehow you kept us alive. I don't even have words." His voice trembled with emotion, a mixture of relief, admiration, and disbelief. Emily placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You made it through because you trusted me, and more importantly, you trusted yourselves. You followed the plan, and you survived. That's what matters." As the squad gathered to survey the battlefield, Emily began a careful assessment. Equipment had been lost, some vehicles were destroyed, and several soldiers had minor injuries. But there were no fatalities, a testament to the precision, strategy, and leadership she had demonstrated throughout the ordeal. Every decision she had made, every prediction she had anticipated, had saved lives. Hours later, a convoy of reinforcements arrived, moving cautiously through the desert, aware of the previous day's ambush. Officers and medics disembarked, assessing the battlefield and tending to the wounded. Reports of Emily's tactical brilliance spread quickly among the newcomers, sparking murmurs of admiration and incredulity. She had not only saved her squad, but had inflicted a decisive defeat on a well-prepared enemy, turning what could have been a massacre into a tactical victory. The commanding officer, Colonel Harding, approached Emily directly. He was a stern man, known for his exacting standards and his reluctance to praise easily. Yet his eyes betrayed surprise and respect. "Sergeant Carter," he said, his voice measured but firm, "I've received reports of your actions during the ambush. Your planning, leadership, and execution were extraordinary. You've not only saved your squad, but you've ensured a decisive blow against enemy forces. Outstanding work. Emily stood at attention, a mix of pride and humility in her posture. Thank you, sir. I only did what was necessary to ensure the survival of my squad. Harding nodded, acknowledging both her skill and her humility. Well, necessary or not, your squad and I are grateful. Actions like yours set the standard for excellence in the field. You've proven that leadership isn't about rank or experience alone, it's about foresight, decisiveness, and courage under pressure. The squad watched silently, some exchanging quiet smiles, others nodding in agreement. Mills, standing slightly behind, finally broke the silence. I owe you an apology, he said, voice low but sincere. I doubted you, and I was wrong. You carried us through hell, and I won't forget it. Emily simply nodded. We all have our roles, Sergeant. You followed the plan when it mattered. That's what counts. As the sun climbed higher, the squad prepared to depart the battlefield, their mission complete. Emily moved among them, ensuring every soldier was ready, every piece of equipment accounted for, and every wound treated. She had learned the importance of attention to detail the hard way, and she refused to leave anything to chance. The journey back to base was quiet, the squad subdued by exhaustion, but buoyed by relief and pride. For many, the events of the past 24 hours had transformed their perception of Emily Carter. She was no longer the outsider, the underestimated woman in the squad. They now saw her as a leader, a strategist, and the person who had saved their lives. During the drive back, Emily reflected on the battles fought, the decisions made, and the lessons learned. Leadership was more than giving orders. It was about anticipating threats, understanding people, and maintaining composure under extreme stress. Every scoff, every doubt, every mocking comment from her fellow soldiers had become a catalyst for proving herself, and the results spoke for themselves. Upon returning to base, Emily and her squad received formal recognition. Medals, commendations, and reports documented their actions during the ambush and counterattack. Emily's name, once met with skepticism, was now spoken with respect throughout the ranks. She had earned not just recognition, but trust, credibility, and a lasting legacy among her peers. Even in the days that followed, the squad continued to reference her guidance and foresight. Training sessions incorporated her strategies, and new recruits were briefed on her actions as an example of leadership under pressure. Emily's calm, precise, and courageous approach had become a model, demonstrating that preparation, intelligence, and decisive action could overcome overwhelming odds. One evening, as the sun set over the desert base, Emily stood alone for a moment, gazing at the horizon. The sand dunes, now peaceful, bore the scars of the recent battle, but they also symbolized resilience and survival. She allowed herself a quiet smile, a rare moment of reflection. The squad approached, breaking her solitude. Mills, Ramirez, Davis, and the others stood nearby, tired but alive, and their respect for her was evident in every gesture, every glance. Sergeant, Ramirez said softly, I don't know how we'd have made it without you. You didn't just lead us. You saved us. Emily looked at him, her green eyes steady and calm. We saved ourselves because we followed the plan, stayed focused, and trusted each other. I just made sure we executed it correctly. Mills stepped forward, a faint smile breaking through his usual stoicism. You've changed the way we see leadership, Carter. Not just in the field, but in how we operate as a team. I won't forget this. Emily nodded, acknowledging the sentiment without vanity. The battle was over, the enemy defeated, and the squad's trust in her had been solidified. The desert, unforgiving and relentless, had tested them all, and Emily had emerged as a true leader, capable of guiding her team through impossible odds. As night fell, stars appearing in the clear desert sky, the squad gathered around a small fire. Laughter, quiet conversation, and the relief of survival filled the air. Emily sat among them, not above them, but as part of the team she had led so effectively. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax, knowing that she had earned not only their trust, but their admiration. The desert had been a crucible, testing courage, skill, and resilience. Emily Carter had passed with distinction. The squad had survived, not by luck, but by leadership, foresight, and unwavering determination. And as the firelight danced across their faces, one truth was undeniable. The woman they had once dismissed had proven herself beyond doubt. Emily Carter, underestimated, doubted, and tested, had emerged victorious, not just in battle, but in the hearts and minds of those who had once questioned her. The story of the ambush would be told for years, a testament to courage, strategy, and the power of unwavering leadership.